We will now continue with the second day of budget hearings with testimony from Commissioner Bill Chung of the Department of Youth and Community Development. DYCD's mission is to support our city's low-income youth and their families through a range of programs aimed at providing them with the opportunity to grow and succeed. These include after-school and literacy programs, family support services, and youth employment. The Council has made DYCD's program a top priority in recent years, and I believe the record is clear on our success. In fiscal 2017, we pushed the administration to fund a record 60,000 summer job employment programs, as well as to provide additional funding on top of significant funds given by the Council for 6,000 year-round jobs for our city's youth. The administration also agreed to join us in creating a joint youth employment task force to assess the needs and effectiveness of SYP and Work, Learn, Grow. I had the privilege of co-chairing this task force, working alongside Council members Mario and Eugene. We also had the support of several of our colleagues, including Councilmember Chin, Cumbo, Gibson, Rodriguez, Torres, and Williams. The task force released our report on April 27th. While we were excited about the new pilots that will be implemented in SYP this summer, we are concerned that the report does not address year-round employment. We also want to ensure that the new SYP procurement process allows for enough flexibility and diversity in format to support providers with best meeting the needs of our city's youth. I look forward to continuing to work with the administration on finding new and innovative ways to expand youth employment opportunities. Turning to the executive budget, as I've stated on multiple occasions, I believe that DYCD could be a stronger partner during the budget process. While DYCD's executive budget does include minimum wage increases for SYP, 3,600 new Sonic slots, and additional money to support the 11 new beacons added in the preliminary budget, the administration could do more to alleviate our concerns. The 5,000 new SYP jobs added in the preliminary budget were a step in the right direction, but barely begin to address the overwhelming demand for this program. We hope that the administration would heed our call for 15,000 new jobs to be funded in the executive budget. Instead, not a single additional summer youth employment job is added to the 5,000 we saw at prelim. Given that the Council has repeatedly indicated that youth programs are a key priority for us, it is disappointing that our calls for enhancement to these programs were ignored by the administration. Besides SYP, the administration neglected to baseline $47.9 million to provide year-round employment to 12,000 young people, $27.7 million to restore the Sonic program to its original size and provide summer afternoon programming to 34,000 middle school students, and $16 million for Campus to provide expanded after-school programming to elementary school students. When we talk about providing opportunity for our city's youth, youth employment and after-school programming are exactly what we mean. But words are not enough. They must be joined with action, and this budget does not go far enough. We expect that the administration will work closely with us over the next few weeks to address these concerns as we move towards budget adoption. Before I turn over the mic to my co-chair for his opening statements, I want to thank the finance staff for their work and on this hearing, Regina Pareda-Ryan, Aisha Wright, Jessica Ackerman, and Eric Bernstein. I would also like to thank our finance director, Latanya McKinney, for her continued leadership in pushing expansion of these critical programs. I will now turn it over to Chair Eugene for his opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Chair Ferreira-Copeland, and good afternoon. I'm Councilmember Matthew Eugene, Chair of the Committee on Youth Services, and I would like to join my colleague in welcoming you, all of you, to this oversight hearing of DYCD Fiscal 2018 Executive Budget. The Fiscal 2018 Executive Budget for DYCD totaled $679.8 million. This includes $15.6 million and minimum wage increases for the Summer Youth Employment Program, but only for 1 year. And it includes $10.7 million for 3,600 more after-school slots for middle school students in Sonic, but only during the school year. Frankly, this budget does not do justice to the need of interest of New York City. Like Chair Ferris Copeland and my colleagues on the Council, I'm very disappointed that the administration has failed to better meet the demand for jobs in summer youth employment program. SYEP serves many very important purposes in New York City. SYEP not only helps young people earn money, but it gives them job training and keeps them safe. It gives employers across the 5 boroughs extra staff during the summer month, and it helps support our city's economy. New York needs this program. Nearly 140,000 applications last year only underscored the need for this program, and that is the reason why the Council continued to push for 15,000 more SYP jobs for this year. I'm also very concerned about the lack of attention on the executive budget to services for disconnected youth. The Council has recently passed legislation to address this, establishing a disconnected youth task force that will meet every 2 years to review programming and make recommendations. I look forward to the work of the new task force, but I'm concerned about what services will be available in the midterm. I do not want our city's young people who desperately need jobs and education to have to wait another year before they see any real changes. As a city, we must be better than that. Before we begin, I would like to thank my legislative and budget director, Ethan Tucker, and the staff of the Youth Committee, Jessica Ackerman, Senior Finance Analyst, and Kiu Gishuwu, Committee Counsel, and Michael Benjamin, our Senior Policy Analyst. Commissioner, I'm looking forward to your testimony. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Chair, please.
Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before the committee today and to respond honestly to council member questions?
I do. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Ferris Copeland, Chairman Eugene, and members of the Finance and Youth Services Committee. I am Bill Chong, Commissioner of the Department of Youth and Community Development. I'm joined by Andre White, Associate Commissioner, Youth Workforce Development, and Jadine Fanor, Assistant Commissioner of the Bureau of Budget and Finance. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on DYCD's fiscal year 2018 executive budget. With summertime just around the corner, planning for this year's summer youth employment program is well underway. Mayor de Blasio has demonstrated yet again his commitment to youth employment by adding $15.6 million in the executive budget to support the city's portion of the minimum wage increase for SYP. This investment, in addition to the 5,000 new jobs announced in the preliminary budget, which increased the total number of baseline SYP slots to 65,000 for this summer. And as part of the ongoing partnership between the mayor and the city council to support opportunities for young people to work and explore careers, the Youth Employment Task Force report was released last week. Chaired by Deputy Mayor for Strategic Policy Initiatives Richard Bury and City Council Finance Chair Julissa Ferris Copeland, the task force was charged with assessing the key areas of growth and improvement in the city's youth workforce programs. The task force also developed recommendations to inform the future direction of the Summer Youth Employment Program and Work, Learn, and Grow. The recommendations fall under two categories: program focus and program quality, and operations and system building. Some key recommendations include: 1, investing in enhanced support services for SYP vulnerable youth program participants. As part of building provider capacity and strengthening the program model to serve vulnerable youth. Enhanced career development and service learning activities can be developed to meet the unique needs of the population. Additional services could also include pre-program orientation, counseling, and referral services on conclusion of one's SYP experience. Number 2, strengthening connections between SYP providers and schools to improve in-school career development. Creating more deliberate partnerships between schools and SYP would allow students to receive dedicated city support for career exploration during the school year. 3, facilitating seamless entry between the city's youth employment initiatives. Strengthening the interagency connections and transition to work, learn, and grow and other DYCD and city agency youth employment programs will benefit all SYP participants, particularly disconnected youth who require more support. Participants can build on their SYP experience through sequential opportunities to further explore careers and the world of work while developing job skills. 4, creating a specific younger youth track focused on career exploration. Younger program participants would benefit from a more tailored SYP experience focused on career exploration and project-based learning. 5, revamping the SYP timeline to better support the job development and employer matching process. A prime benefit of having a significant portion of SYP funding baseline is that program planning and startup activities can start much earlier. Providers have more time to plan, develop quality job placements, and raise the quality of the experience for participants. And 6, boosting system building efforts through new training programs, leveraging of available resources, new partnerships, and data system upgrades. Enhancing the key elements of a summer youth employment program and work, learn, and grow, such as the provider capacity, interagency connections, employee engagement, and evaluation, will improve overall program quality and operational efficiency. The report's recommendation will be incorporated into a concept paper we expect to release this summer, which allows the provider community to submit feedback on proposed enhancements to the city's youth workforce programming. The recommendations and the concept paper will also inform DYCD's SYP request for proposals, which we expect to release in the fall of 2017. I want to thank again Chairwoman Ferris Copeland, Chairman Eugene, Councilman Mateo for their leadership on this task force. I also want to thank their team of colleagues, Council Members Chin, Gibson, Rodriguez, Torres, and Williams, for all supporting the work of the task force. On April 17th, DYCD released its Beacon Community Centers RFP. The RFP includes the new investments made to the Beacon program, which were first announced in last year's executive budget. Each beacon will be funded at $550,000 in fiscal year 2018, an increase from the $400,000 in the current fiscal year. The RFP includes funding for new beacon sites, raising the total number of beacons to 91. I want to thank Mayor de Blasio for his leadership in expanding beacon funding. I also want to thank the City Council, Chairwoman Ferris Copeland, and Chairman Eugene for your leadership and steadfast support of beacons over the years. These new beacon resources represent the first funding increase in over 2 decades and is a very appropriate way to celebrate the beacon program, which turned 25 last year. Under Mayor de Blasio, DYCD has significantly expanded its funding to support Schools Out NYC middle school after-school programs, offering access to every middle school student that is interested in a program. Currently, over 66,000 youth are enrolled in Sonic programs citywide. The executive budget builds on the mayor's historic investment and a commitment by adding $10.7 million to fund another 3,600 Sonic program seats. Some new middle schools and those that opted out of the 2014 expansion RFP will now have an opportunity to offer after-school programming through Sonic. We are developing our plan for how these seats will be allocated, and we can share more details soon. In fiscal year 28 executive budget, Mayor de Blasio continues his strong commitment to youth, families, and communities by again investing resources in DYCD. We are very excited for the opportunity to further expand our programs and build on our resources. We look forward to continuing to work with the City Council to create opportunities that improve the lives of all New Yorkers. My staff and I are ready to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. We're going to jump right into the summer youth and year-round employment programs. 15,000 new slots in fiscal 2018's preliminary budget response is what we called for. and the administration's to increase for summer youth to serve an additional 15,000. What is DYCD's position on expanding SYEP?
So, as you have seen over the last 3 years, we're committed to two major things. One is obviously expanding the program, and with the help of the council and the mayor, we've almost doubled the number of jobs in the program, and focus on quality, and which is why we found the task force work so helpful, because it helps inform the planning process for the new model. As the budget director said yesterday, I think the conversation about adding jobs will continue in the budget adoption process. And so I think we're looking forward to whatever comes out of those negotiations.
Okay. So can you maybe just very briefly talk about what were the challenges that you saw in expanding from 30 to 60? And were those challenges or are those challenges addressed in this new RFP that you released?
Well, I'll start and Andre can add in. I think the biggest challenge in growing was the last-minute funding. I mean, this was something that was discussed, I think, in the very first meeting of the task force last fall, is that quality is also a function of having certainty about how much money you have to work with, because the more time you have to plan, the better the experience for a young person and for the employer. So this year, because so much money, I believe $97 million was baseline, we were able to start the process earlier, applications were earlier, and then Andre can add sort of like what providers have been telling us about this year's experience as it's different from last year's.
Andre White, Associate Commissioner, Youth Workforce Development Programs at DYCD. So this year has been incredibly lot less stressful for our providers for the most part. As the Commissioner mentioned, we were able to release the application earlier. We were able to start the lottery process earlier. Because of that, providers have the ability to sit with each and every young person to do a deeper assessment and to make sure that they're matched their interests. So far, we have enrolled a large number of participants. We still have 2 months to go. But
So,
overall,
I'm sorry, what's our total as of to date?
it's 39,000 young people that have been enrolled.
And how many have applied?
Over 146,000.
146,000 to date. And what's the cutoff date?
The application deadline already passed.
Right. I'm just saying, if there's a potential of additional growth, then you would, do you know what I'm saying? We're kind of, there's going to be a cohort that's exactly where we were before. So do you open expand the opportunity, or do you just take the 140-something thousand and apply for, and pick more young people from that
It would be from the
universe?
current pool of
Okay.
applicants.
And it's 140?
6,000.
46,000. Okay. Thank you. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So again, because of the timeline and making some adjustments to that, we have seen a lot of improvement. In the past, some of the challenges were around developing work sites, particularly for the younger youth. As you know, young people ages 14 and 15, employers unfortunately did not want to take on that responsibility. They felt like it was babysitting. So providers struggled around developing appropriate sites for that population. And I think that was the largest challenge for a lot of the providers.
So is it improved now because they have more time?
Absolutely. So because everything was moved up, the worksite recruitment process started earlier, as well as the application process.
Okay. Do you have a kind of a breakdown of how many of your young people are placed in city agencies?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Can you give us like the top 3 agencies? And then if you can share with the committee your list of agencies?
Absolutely. Just give me 1 second.
Sure. Take your time. It's pouring outside.
So while he's looking, last year, for the first time, the mayor sent out an email to all the agency commissioners, and that really reflected a huge increase for us. I think it was I seem to remember 6,000 young people last year were working at a city agency, which is 10%. And I know the council members themselves, I think we had a record number of council members, 27, I think it
Yes.
was, who also. So I'm a strong believer that we have to expose young people to careers in public service because that's the only way you learn. And so you have the list?
Yes, absolutely. So in 2015, just to give you some stats, we had over 1,108 young people that worked in city agencies, at 33 city agencies to be exact. And last summer, we had over 4,000 young people working in city agencies.
So 4,000 young people. And what do you think, if you have it there, what were the top 3 agencies for placement?
Administration for Children's Services, DEP, Department of Parks and Recreations.
They weren't cleaning parks, were they?
I'm sorry?
I was asking if they were cleaning parks, but that's fine. We can get the job descriptions later.
Okay.
So the Youth Employment Task Force developed a final report, as we all know. Can you go into more detail in describing each of the 4 pilots? And I know you discussed it in your opening statement, but if we could actually, it was what we spend most of our time. And I think it was great, but it was also unfortunate because we didn't get to delve into the Work, Learn, Grow program. And we sent the Work, Learn, Grow concept to you as a year-round, and that's what we called it. And you gave it back to us as Work, Learn, Grow, which I think the average person doesn't understand that, summer youth employment is called that, summer youth employment. So people are like, oh, that's where I go apply for a summer youth job. Work, Learn, Grow could be a gardening program. We don't know, right? So that's why the council found it very important, and we're going to continue to have these conversations. I believe it should still be called a year-round program. I know that it wasn't because of the programming and you added on to SYP, but we should be speaking about this because it's trying to achieve something that I think it's important and something that can last in our city, and that's giving young people an opportunity to work year-round after school so that they don't feel that they have to go work at a McDonald's or have, that they can have other opportunities. But if you can just walk me through the pilot programs for the record, I appreciate it.
Right. So when we think about the task force recommendations, one of the recommendations really focus on younger youth and ensuring that we offer a career exploration model for them. So the pilot that we're testing, this summer is working very closely with Department of Education Career Clue program. Right now, we have identified over 150 young people, ages 14 and 15, that's going to be engaged in a mix of academic work as also project-based learning. They're going to be working with a nonprofit called Solar One, which really provides sort of like energy exploration work. They're going to be in the classrooms. They're going to be taking tours, visiting different offices, different locations. They're going to have guest speakers. And the idea there is to ensure that not only whatever they're learning in the classroom, the idea is to make sure what they're learning in the classroom is also applied outside of the classroom, right? They're also going to be getting an academic credit, an environmental science credit at the end, the conclusion of the program, and they're going to be getting a stipend.
That's a great example. And then that's one pilot?
That's one, yes.
So we got 3 more.
Yes. The second one focuses on vulnerable youth, young people ages 14 through 24. As we know, many of them are not work ready. So when they come through the door and they're doing an assessment with our providers, recognize that they have the skills necessary to thrive in an independent workplace. So the idea there is to create a service learning model for those young people. We're going to be working with a group that's called the LAMP. And what they're going to be focused on is really the technology work, creating a PSA, using their phones, learning how to edit videos, and actually, they're actually going to be identifying a theme that's important to them in their community. And based on this theme, they're going to create a PSA that they're going to share with us at the end of the summer. That's a vulnerable youth pilot. So there's 50 young people that's going to be working on that specific pilot.
And how many are working on the first pilot?
150.
150 on the first one. That's the Solar
One.
50
On the vulnerable youth.
On
Vulnerable youth, yeah.
And that's 14 to 21.
24.
14 to 24.
Yeah.
I thought one of our recommendations was in specific to the older.
Correct. Again, we're just testing the concept.
Okay.
Doesn't mean it can't be applied to young people up to age 21.
And what's number 3?
Number 3 is the second-year opportunity pilot. We had a lot of conversation in the task force around allowing young people who excelled during SYP that summer to get that second opportunity, right, to be placed at the same work site they worked at the year before. So we're working very closely with our providers who have identified 50 young people, have identified over 50 placements using the same work sites from last year. And those young people are going to be engaged in more rigorous activities this summer. And the fourth one is working very closely with the CTE schools as well as Expanded Ed. And these two programs, they work with these young people year-round in specific sector trainings, and they're going to be developing jobs in these specific sectors for them throughout the summer.
And that's how many?
So for CTE, it's 360 young people, and for Expanded Ed, it's 250.
Okay. Did you total all this so that I don't have to do this quickly?
860.
How much? 860?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess for us, and especially as from the Finance Committee, there was no budget outlay when we, so we'd like to see where you're going to budget this out, even if it's cost neutral, right? Because it potentially could be cost neutral if you're doing it within the envelope of the current budget. But it would be great to see what one pilot program costs versus another. I'm sure there's a reason why some of these have 50 and others have 150 and others have 260. So kind of better understanding that. Do you have the budget breakdown on these?
I could talk through the budget breakdown in terms of how we got to those numbers. So on the Younger Youth Pilot, as I said before, we're working very closely with DOE, Career Clue, right? They're the ones funding that portion of the pilot. What we are responsible for is paying the stipend to the young people. So again, that's cost neutral because that's a typical model for SYP. DOE is committed to providing teachers in the classroom and providing funding for Solar One.
Is there a budget line that we can follow at DYC?
We could share that with you.
Okay.
On the VY pilot, we were working closely with the LAMP, and that was funded through YMI and CEO funding. And that's roughly anywhere from 30 to 40,000 for the equipment and also the training that the LAMP and the curriculum that they're going to be developing. And again, the wages DYCD were responsible for.
So that's the $50 50 person contingent.
Exactly.
Okay.
And for the year-round piece with CTE and Expanded Ed, again, we're responsible for the wages. Those programs actually already engage with the young people throughout the school year, so those resources are already there.
Okay.
And the second-year opportunity is the same principle that applies.
And the CTE and
Expanded Ed.
Expanded.
Right. So they take care of the training throughout the school year, and then we pay the wages in the summer.
Okay. Can you send us a copy of this budget breakdown?
Absolutely.
And if it's tied to an agency like DOE, if you can also share with us where kind of that exists and
Sure.
or how you follow that connection of the cost. So I know that there's something that's very important to the mayor within this conversation, and that is the vulnerable youth or youth at risk, or, it means everyone has different titles, but I'm also learning that everyone has different definitions. Limiting access to SYP, when the mayor announced the release of the task force final report, he talked about wanting to ensure that SYP serves the city's highest need youth. The council feels very strongly that SYP should be universally available, regardless of background. Who is the mayor or your agency or anyone on that side of the hall referring to when you mention highest need or most vulnerable or whatever other term that we've seen used in this conversation?
So right now, there is no plans to change the qualifications of who would be eligible. So let me make that clear up front. The Summer Youth Employment Program currently targets communities where there's high youth unemployment. So the programs tend to generally be located in communities where there's high youth unemployment. In fact, in the task force report, we cited that 77% of the young people last summer were TANF eligible. So, but that doesn't mean that if you're not TANF eligible, you can't apply. But we're very deliberate because we know that these resources are precious, and we want to make sure that the young people who have the least access to the summer job market have an opportunity to get jobs. So, but there are no changes being considered to change the qualifications or make it anything different than it is now.
So the application is the new RFP that would go out, none of that would change?
Yes, it's still going to be a universal program, but I think the question is, how do we make sure that the people who benefit the most are the ones who need it the most?
Right, but from our what we are hearing and what we want to be clear on is that there is something to be said about it being universal.
Right.
And if it's universal, that means that anyone from my district can benefit, just like
Right.
anyone from Minority Leader Mattio's district can benefit. And that we're not assuming that because there's a district that the median income may be high,
Right.
doesn't mean that they don't have areas of where families can benefit, nor are we saying that because a middle-income family, because you're middle income or considered middle income, when it comes to how we describe the medium income in New York, doesn't mean that a young person within that household could not benefit from this program.
There's no plan to add income requirements.
Okay. Now, year-round, which is something that, was conceptualized by this council, something that I care for deeply personally. How are we supposed to move forward and improve a program that isn't in the budget? It is something that was not included in the executive budget. It was not included in the preliminary budget, and it's something that's very important to this council. So are we saying that, this is a program that you don't necessarily believe in, or this is the message we're getting? You're basically saying, council, you love it so much, you fund it.
Well, we are appreciative of the council's support of this. I think this year, in the second year of the program, the number of young people has maintained the same. In fact, the number of hours they've worked has gone up. So we see a lot of positive signs. I think it's part of the ongoing conversation as we move towards the adopted, because like the Summer Youth Employment Program, this is something that's been jointly worked on with the council, and so I'm confident that we're heading in the right direction on this. It unfortunately didn't make it to the executive budget, but we certainly.
Is this something you asked for OMB to baseline when you asked for your baseline?
Well, they are aware of the success of the program, and I think they're aware of the council's support of the program.
And I think that's why it wasn't baselined, because they know.
Well, I can't speak for OMB on this.
Well,
but we certainly, from DYC's perspective, we like the program. It's been an enhancement to young people who've been in the Summer Youth Employment Program, and I think the numbers show that young people worked more hours. The first year was a challenge. It was a learning curve.
Right.
This year, I think we've gotten better at getting young people, placing the right young people in the program, because not every young person can work in the school year. And so it's finding the right match and finding the right work site, because the work site that was available in the summer may not be available in the school year because of a young person's schedule.
Right. So would we have capacity if the council decided to expand this program? I didn't like that face.
So let me just give you some background. So currently, we contract for Work, Learn, and Grow. These are existing SYP providers, right? So they're the ones, we amend their SYP contracts, release a short application, then they apply for this contract. I think potentially there might be room to grow the program beyond the 6,000 number, but in terms of doubling, I think it's important to have a conversation with our providers to see exactly what capacity they could manage.
I would think that city agencies would probably make sense. It's a year-round job, so it's not like a summer camp that we know has an end date.
Right.
But there's probably, you're strengthening some of your job sites that probably have a potential to handle these year-round, probably DOE or even young people working in their own schools.
Right. I think the challenge there is, most city agencies, for the most part, is sort of like this 9-to-5 schedule, right? A lot of the young people end school at 3-4, so by the time they travel to the agency is already closed. So, I think for those agencies that maybe work around the clock, maybe young people over 18 who was able to work beyond 7 p.m., that might be a good fit for them.
Right, what? Right. Okay, well, we're going to continue the conversation with year-round. And can you please share any reporting measures that you have on both SYP and year-round that can show how the program is doing, what have been some of the feedback that you're getting from young people and from providers. So any of your evaluation tools and what you've gotten, if you can share that with the committee,
Sure.
would be greatly appreciated. I have follow-up questions on Sonic and Beacons, but I'm going to give my chair an opportunity to ask his questions and our colleagues that are also here, and I'll come back on a second round.
Thank you very much, Chair Copeland. With respect to the minimum wage increases, when the preliminary budget was released, we saw $9.3 million, as you know, for fiscal year 2018 to support 5,000 new jobs in SYP at a minimum wage of $11 per hour. Up from fiscal 2017, a minimum wage of $9 per hour, and increasing the total number of jobs to 65. Our out-year funding for these new job increase in correlation with the scheduled minimum wage increases. The fiscal 2018 executive budget at $15.6 million to bring the remaining 60,000 jobs up to the new $11 per hour minimum wage, but only for 1 year. We know that the minimum wage for New York City is scheduled to increase to $13 per hour in December 2017 and to $15 per hour in December 2018. And we know that SYEP will continue to serve these 60,000 position in the out year, regardless of how many more are added. Why the administration is doesn't baseline the minimum wage increases?
So OMB is fully aware of the schedule of minimum wage increases, so we've been given assurances that that will be added. The big open question is what the cost of the new models will be, and that we haven't quite figured out yet, and that will be reflected in the RFP that's released this fall. And so when we know how much administering the program will cost, the fixed costs related to the minimum wage will be added.
Let's talk a little bit about the task force now. We know that, the recommendation of the task force, we worked so hard in the task force, and the task force made certain recommendations. Some of them has been observed and reported, but not all of them. Let's say, for example, the special application, for the new job, because we know that the people who are working in the summer job, in summer camp, let's say, for example, 15%, I believe, of young people in SYP work in the summer jobs. We are talking now approximately about 9,000 young people. But the task force recommended a separate application just to ensure that the people who are recruited, they like to do that. Why?
I mean, I think one of the things in the current application, and we can provide you a copy, is we ask young people what their interests are. And so one of the great things about having baseline funding as a result of the efforts by the council and the mayor is that the young people, when they apply and they're selected, and as Andre mentioned, we actually pay a lot more individual attention to each young person, and we can match them with an actual job that interests them. So I think a separate application would just create more paperwork. We collect all this information. We really, I think, are really appreciative. I mean, I said this to the staff, and I said this to the summer youth employment providers, is that by having baseline funding, it really represents a sea change in the program, that for the first time in recent memory, people can plan and really do a great job in getting young people the right job that matches their interests and background. So a separate application would probably not be helpful. It would just create more layers. We already do it now. We just now have the time and the funding to do it early.
In terms of work, learn, and grow, this is a very important program. We all know that, because giving the jobs to the young people during the summer through SYP is great. But we have to think about those young people who need jobs also throughout the year. That explains the importance, the need of the work, learn, and grow. So the city council funded, 6,000 a slot or position and work, learn, and grow. But because of the increase of the minimum wage, if the city council want to fund this program again, what will be the cost because of the minimum wage increase?
We can send to you the one nuance about the Work, Learn, and Grow program is that since it's a year-round program, it's in 2 different calendar years. And so, for example, the schedule of minimum wage increases takes effect December 31st of this year and the next year. So it's, we can provide that information to you afterwards. So the minimum wage increase hits mid-year.
Okay, so you will send the...
We'll send it to you.
Thank you very much. So the city council voted on intro 708, asking the creation of the task force. Very important. We believe that the task force is very important. So when we see the city of New York, in the city of New York, we have a lot of resources. We have a lot of dedicated, skilled, dedicated people, the commissioners and also the service providers, even the young people. So we think that if we come together, all those qualified, dedicated people come together and bring all the resources that we have together, we'll be in the better position to serve our young people. So where we are at now in terms of, putting this task force together, in the process of, bringing everybody together to create that task force, what is the position and the participation of DYCD in the process of creating the task force?
Well, I think we're awaiting a decision from the mayor's office on who the chairperson will be. DYCD is a representative of the task force, and we agree on the need for more coordination. In fact, one of the things I focused on my first start as commissioner was really improving the coordination within DYCD, because we have a lot of different programs that serve young people who may be disconnected, but they weren't connected. They weren't working together. So we have work groups of our different staff, those who may work with homeless youth programs and those that work with out-of-school youth programs. They're often the same young person. And how do we begin to build on the resources we already have and do a better job? And we've had conversations with the small business services about how do we do handoffs of young people who exit our programs into their programs, because they serve anyone who's 18 and over. So I think you can't do enough coordination in government. I have someone who's worked in 4 different administrations. I see one of the biggest challenges, besides money obviously, is how do we better coordinate what we have? And it's frustrating at times to see that we're not really maximizing that. So we look forward to the work of the task force.
But I know that you say that you are waiting on the mayor, but is there any recommendation from DYCD in terms of how to work together to better, create these task force?
I think we would share our experiences that we've been doing for the last 3 years.
I'm sorry?
We would share our experiences of the last 3 years as best practices of how, instead of looking at people as individual program participants, look at them as whole people, understanding that a young person who might be homeless, while you're providing housing for them, they also may need a job, or they may need other types of services. So I think we're taking a much more holistic approach to the people we serve rather than looking at separate siloed programs.
Yeah, you said that you will, but right
Well,
now...
we are at DYCD, but I'm not responsible for all the other agencies, so that's why the task force, which the mayor's office will take the lead in appointing a chairperson, will take on the larger role outside of what DYCD. I can control what we do at DYCD, and that's why 3 years ago we convened all the different programs that we currently fund to figure out strategies and how they can better work together. But I agree with you that you need a larger strategy, and that's something that I don't necessarily, I can't tell SBS what to do. We can reach out and coordinate, and that's why the task force provides a forum to have those conversations.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I will be back with some more questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chair. We'll both be back on the second round, and now we will hear, we've been joined by Council Members Chin, Rosenthal, Greenfield. We will now hear from Council Member Williams, followed by Council Member Chin.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony. As you might know, I've been very interested in summer youth and youth jobs, and I thank both chairs for their leadership and the council as well. I've been trying to, I will just say from the beginning, there's just been a very big resistance from this administration and my belief to wanting to expand this, and there's been a whole bunch of reasons why. We can label things universally fairly easy from pre-K to 3K, but when it comes to this, we have difficulties. So we did get a report, and it was 3 months late, and one of the things that I believe it avoided was the question of expansion. So I wanted to know why you think that was left out of the report in general. We had some good questions answered, I must say, about the quality of it, but the main question of expanding youth jobs, primarily summer youth, was left out of the report. Why was that?
Well, I think the focus of the task force and the very first meeting, there was a conversation about, it's not about, we shouldn't focus on budget, but we should focus on quality. And so that's why I think you see a lot of the work of the task force was about how to improve the model. I think as we begin to test these recommendations this summer and issue the concept paper and hopefully finalize the RFP in the fall, we'll be able to get to a better idea of what the cost of doing a different model will be. And that will help inform the decision of how to grow the program. Because we want both quantity and quality. Because obviously, I think everyone agrees that we can do a better job in the Summer Youth Employment Program. The first big step, as I said earlier, was to baseline funding for the current program. The next step will be to test these different recommendations and then cost out what these new services will cost. And then that will inform how much it will cost to grow the program. I think, as the budget director said yesterday, I think he agrees that the issue of continuing to expand this program will be part of the conversations as we move towards an adoption before the end of the fiscal year. But looking into the out years, I think the big issue is how much will it cost to run a new model, and that will then, because we know what the minimum wage will be. That's
well,
not.
So now, because I'm running out of time. One, I think we purposefully avoided asking that question. I don't think it was a special decision that was made. I think it was purposely avoided, and I think it shouldn't have been. And all of these things that we're saying, costs and all that, I think is the same type of thing when it comes to UPK and 3K and 3PK. Somehow we were able to get past that and get the thing done. So I don't know why we're refusing to do that here. Also, I want to understand, because I do believe there's capacity issues, what has been done from last year to help expand capacity?
Well, so it's, I don't think it's a refusal. I think the capacity is the same capacity we had last
But there's been a
year.
refusal to accept the concept even before we're getting it done. I want to make that clear.
Oh, well, I think in order for us to cost something out, we have to test it. And that's what I think we're doing this summer, because then when you know if it works, then you can discuss what the cost of scaling it up are. So it's kind of premature to talk about how much a new model will cost unless you actually test it.
I hear you, but we've...
So on the capacity...
This is a long-standing program, just so we're clear.
Right.
So there's a lot of tests out there, but the capacity issue is what I...
Well, the capacity is based on the fact that we have the same number of programs as we did last year. So based on what they told us, and we're constantly talking to them, in the preliminary budget, it was clear to us from what they've said that 65,000 was the maximum they could do without compromising quality.
My question was, what have you done since last year?
Well, you can't
to
add
expand-
capacity until you have a new RFP. And so the new RFP won't be issued.
Sir, we've heard for several years that capacity
Right.
was a problem. My question is, what have you done to work with the providers or add additional providers to expand capacity? That's my question.
Well, the money that was given to us was to cover 65,000
You did
jobs.
nothing. That's the answer. That's apparently
Right.
what the answer is. You did nothing to help expand capacity. I'm trying to give you
Well, I'm trying to be straightforward with you.
Yeah, if you're saying that-
Excuse me.
you did nothing because the number was the same, that means you did nothing. And so I'm asking you what you did.
The capacity actually gone up 5,000 jobs in the preliminary budget, and that was based on the feedback we got from 100 programs. I don't have the authority to add programs arbitrarily. There has to be an RFP to add. I mean, I'm
I didn't
required
ask you
under
to
law.
add programs. I didn't ask you to do anything
but see,
arbitrarily.
but Councilor,
This is the problem. Let me tell you why. Because if there was a belief that we should expand, then there will be things done to help expand. Even the 65,000 that you were told, we know that's not the number that we want. So if the issue is capacity, you would do something to help expand the capacity. You're saying you capped it at 65 simply because that was the number you were told. I didn't ask you to go out and expand the program. I didn't ask you to add additional programs. But there are things that could be done to entice additional providers in case that capacity is expanded. But if an administration does not agree that it should be expanded, perhaps they wouldn't do anything to try to expand it.
Okay. We are committed to expanding capacity. The way we're legally required to do that is through a request for proposal. And to get to the request for proposal, we need to test different models, which came out of the task force's report.
So when the RFP comes out, you're going to then go out and try to expand
yes.
capacity?
But that's how it's
All right,
done
thank you very
legally.
much. I appreciate it.
That's how it's done legally. I don't have the authority to add programs arbitrarily.
That is foolishness. That's foolishness.
Thank you, Councilmember Williams. Councilmember Chin, followed by Councilmember Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to focus my question on the Compass program. Because on the SONIC, the after-school, universal after-school program for middle school kids, it seems like, that's going well. And in this year's budget, you're putting more money in there and you're expanding it to new schools and other schools that didn't have a program. If they want to participate, they can get involved. But my question is about the after-school program for the elementary school kid. Is the administration, is the mayor thinking about universal after-school for elementary school?
I mean, I think we're aware of the need for more services for elementary. It comes up often. I've raised it. No decision's been made because it's obviously quite costly. I think we appreciate the additional monies provided in this year to add additional elementary seats. Part of it will be hopefully addressed with the expansion of the Beacon program. With the additional 11 beacons, they will be serving elementary, but obviously more needs to be done. It's, I think, an ongoing conversation about how do we get to that point. We're not there.
But I think it's administration, it's the mayor thinking about universal after-school program for elementary school kids.
We haven't had that conversation.
Is that a goal that we want to work towards?
We haven't had that conversation. I think there's an awareness about the need to do more in this space.
Can we get a commitment to have that conversation?
Well, that's a conversation you have to have with the mayor.
But you, as a commissioner, you can help.
I mean,
do you think we should have universal after-school program?
I mean, the more after-school
elementary school kids.
The more after-school services, the better. I think we started on that path with the expansion of the Beacon program, but the cost is extremely prohibitive. So, I mean, that's the reality that we have to challenge.
But do we know the total cost?
I don't have that number.
Well, let's start with that, right? At least have an idea what we have to work towards. Because we all know that after-school program is beneficial and is needed, especially for low-income community, for immigrant community. It's been tested. I mean, I was an after-school teacher 40-some years ago, right? And I'm sure a lot of people have benefited through those programs. But right now, not every kid have that opportunity. And in some of the schools, like in my district, the parents have to pay for the after-school program. Some of it might not be a lot of money, but still, it's not free. So a family, if you have, 2 kids or 3 kids, if you have to pay $100 a week, that adds up. So we really have to look at this population. Middle school kids, we all understood. Teenagers, we got to really make sure they're doing the right things and giving them all these creative programs. And it's been great. Everybody loves the middle school after-school program. Right? I hear praises from low-income family, from middle-income family. It's great. But what I'm hearing from the elementary school kids, the parents, they're telling me that they don't have those opportunities. They either have to pay or they have to let the kids stay home by themselves. And that should not be the case in 2017. So I think that DYCD, Commissioner, you need to take the lead on making universal after school and need to include the summer component for elementary school students. And we should work with you. As the council, we want to work with you to make that happen. Can we get a commitment?
So I hear you. I'll bring it back, but it's certainly something that has come up at different town hall meetings that I've attended. So I'm sure the mayor's aware of it, but no decision's been made on this, obviously, because it's a major investment that I'm not sure the city at this point can make. But it's something that's on the radar.
But it's a commitment to really work towards it. We're not saying that open up, but really look at it every year, because I'm so shocked to see that there was $2.4 million that was transferred out of Compass because they didn't use all the money. That should not be, right? Every year we should be putting more money in every year to get towards universal after-school program for elementary school kids, just like the way we're doing for SYEP, right? And we need to start doing it now, and that's the commitment. I'm asking you as the commissioner and DYCD to work with us to start making that happen.
I would be happy to continue the conversation.
Well, thank you. We'll start that. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We will now hear from Councilmember Rosenthal, and we've been joined by Councilmember Cornegie.
Thank you so much, Chairs. And Commissioner, it's nice to see you. I'm putting on my Chair of the Contracts Committee hat. And so I'm going to express a little bit of a lot of disappointment. So the savings that DYCD, just to follow up on my colleague's point, is showing this year is because contracts weren't let, right? What contracts were those that didn't end up being funded? What services were not provided?
It's not contracts not awarded, it's underspending that's typically 2 to 3%. There's never been an experience where a contract spends 100% of their money. Hiring is delayed, people leave jobs. There's always underspending in any particular program. So
Wait. So
yeah, it's called
here's my point.
Okay.
If we go to the next question, which is in 2015, the mayor put in COLA increases and raises up to $15 an hour. We're at the end of 2017, and only 72% of the contracts have had that completed. I'm concerned that part of the money that's not being allocated is because vendors, right, the agencies, the nonprofits, haven't finished their templates, or it hasn't gone through your screening and therefore hasn't gone to the controller. So we're at 28% of your contracts. Those salary increases have not landed in the pay stubs of our workers.
We can get back to you, but I think there was a certain number of programs that declined the increase, which may account for some of the shortfall, but I think we're in pretty good shape as far as most of the contracts registered that asked.
92% of the contracts have been sent over to the controller.
Right.
But only 72% of the contracts that should be getting increases in wages for their workers have been completed by the agency.
Okay, I
So
think
28% is a pretty big number of contract agencies that don't want the money. And if that's true, I'd like the list.
okay. I think our budget staff will meet with you because it doesn't jive with the numbers we have.
I got these numbers from the Mayor's Office of Contracts.
Well, there
About a
might be a
month
lag
ago.
because I know when we started the COLA process, there was a number of programs that did not respond, did not want it. We've gotten better at it, and the ones that did respond, most of them have been registered. Overwhelming numbers have been registered. And so there might be a discrepancy in understanding what was registered and who actually accepted.
There's a pretty big discrepancy
Okay,
going on.
but we'll-
So if our N is about 2,000 contracts,
Right.
right? And if
We'll be happy to sit down with you. I think there's a
1,400
misunderstanding
have
here.
gone through the process. Let's get the names and the dollar amount. You should have the list. I mean, that should be a click of a button. How many contracts?
Well, we do, and we
would
can
have
provide
gotten
that.
the money? How many have gotten it, and how many haven't? And who are these people who are not getting their salary increases? I mean, the governor passed a law that by next year everyone has to be paid $15 an hour. Are we allowing our contract agencies to pay that $15 an hour by providing the city funds that we've, the mayor takes credit, and rightly so, for putting in our wage increases?
We can provide you the list of the programs that have accepted the money, those that have been registered with the controller.
So you're not going to give me the list of the people that haven't
Well, that didn't accept. We can give you the list of people
who
who
are stuck in the system right now.
I don't think
for
there's
some
any
reason.
stuck in the system. I think the discrepancy is that some people said no.
28% of the 2,000 contracts said no.
I think there's that. We'll double check with that, but I don't think it was that high.
Fast math.
But there, we can provide the list of everyone who was eligible, those who didn't apply, and those who have contracts registered, which is
So I appreciate that
that's-
everyone's looking pretty confident over
Yeah,
there, and I appreciate that. So how quickly can we get the list of those who
sometime
have
next
not?
week. Sometime next week. I mean, this is stuff that we have regular meetings with OMB on and with the providers. There have been numerous emails sent to people who said no, numerous
So
deadlines.
We should be clear about those who have said no, because next year they'll be breaking the law.
Well,
I'm really interested to see who said no
Okay,
and how
well-
they're making up the difference next year. I mean, it's an important conversation. We care
Right.
about these workers
Right.
getting paid, at least poverty wages, $15 an hour, right? We care deeply about
I'm
them.
pretty sure the providers who said no understood their legal obligations of the minimum wage.
I
think
don't know. You
Okay.
can't tell
I
me
mean,
confidently that they know, and your office is responsible for administering this program.
But-
So all I want to know is, who are these possibly
We can-
400 contractors who said no to getting more money to pay their workers? It's a simple question.
We can provide you
get
the
back to
list
me on
next
that?
week.
And why does it, okay, today's Friday.
Yes, we can provide the list next week.
So Tuesday?
Um,
Yeah?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Council Member. I wanted to circle back on the Beacon programs. As you know, I am myself as chair, but also the entire council is incredibly pleased with the growth of the Beacon programs. It's something we've been advocating for. Last year, we gave them an increase that they haven't seen in decades. It's no secret, I was a Beacon director for 6 years. I know the incredible blessing that it is for parents and families. I also know the challenges that many directors face. One of the hardest things is to tell a family we're at capacity, and I would think most of our Beacon programs are at capacity. I run an elementary school, Beacon, so I understand the challenges that latchkey kids face. Elementary school is that population that you can't just send home. They can't just walk home. And school ends, most families still have to work till at least 5, if not later. So with all that background, one of the questions that I have is, how were the sites for the 11 new Beacon programs selected? What were what was the envisioning of the Beacon program site location?
So let me start, and then Darrell Rattray will kind of give you more detail. And Darrell, as you know, is Associate Commissioner for the Community Centers and Strategic Partnership, and himself a participant of the Beacon program when it first started a quarter of a century ago. In fact, we're
Well,
about
that
to...
sounds really bad, a quarter of a century ago.
In fact, we're about to release a video featuring Mayor Dinkins next week because it was his leadership and Richard Murphy's leadership
I
that made the
understand.
Beacon program possible. And he was supposed to speak at our 25th anniversary last year, and he didn't get a chance to speak because he was ill that night. So I wanted to give him his due. So we're releasing a video, and Daryl's prominently featured, of course, in the video. But let me start with, you're absolutely right. This program has been a stepchild program for 20 years under the previous two administrations. It was cut, and the first major increase was done last year, and we're happy with it. And since it's been 20 years since we've added a beacon, we wanted to be mindful of several things. One is how the population of the city has shifted, and what boroughs grew, which ones shrank, as well as this changing landscape in schools. Beacons were at one point the only school-based program. Now you have Sonic, you have Compass, you have all these other programs. So we looked at all those factors, and we also understood the neighborhoods change. I mean, I went to my old neighborhood, Bensonhurst, where I went for junior high school, and it was, when I was there, I was the only Chinese student. Half the school is Chinese now. So we're mindful of all these shifts that happened in 20 years. So Darryl, you want to walk us through?
Testing. Good afternoon. So Darryl Ratcher, Associate Commissioner, Community Centers and Strategic Partnerships. So as the Commissioner mentioned, we took a look at the changing demographics since the last Beacon RFP was 10 years ago. So the first criteria we took a look at was actually youth population across the boroughs. And then the second criteria that we used, which was a bit more exhaustive, was partnering with DOE to identify suitable schools who didn't already have programming. So we had to find school locations that could support a Beacon program. And that was sort of the exhaustive second criteria.
Okay. And can you walk me through the timeline? And is there any difference in what we would traditionally see as a beacon? Just like the additional funding wasn't there for decades, the program itself seemed like it's pretty much the same. Does this new RFP have anything nuanced? Or it could be that the program has worked perfectly, and you're just kind of replicating the existing format.
All right, so two things. One, I need to mention that we had several focus groups with stakeholders, providers, executive directors, Beacon directors, before we even finalized the concept paper. So their input went into the design of the concept paper. Once the concept paper was released, we then had another series of focus groups with stakeholders, executive directors, providers, to go over it again, and that input all informed the Beacon RFP that was released. Now, the one major change in the RFP for the past 10 years, the Beacons have focused on middle school programming. What we heard in both the pre-concept paper focus groups and the post-concept paper focus groups is that the Beacon programs need to get back to their roots of having flexibility around who is served at a Beacon location based on the needs of the neighborhood.
Right.
So embedded in the RFP is that flexibility. Now, providers can now propose to us and let us know, based on the neighborhood needs, what the makeup is of their concentration. So whether it be elementary, whether it be middle school, high school, or a combination of those groups, including adults as well.
So, it definitely took me back to my director days. From 3 to 6, we were very much focused on the young kids and doing homework help and doing gym and all those support services. At 6 o'clock, the place turned into a community center. Yep. I was doing ESL, GED, teen programming, teen night, basketball, soccer, like the whole building was being used.
And just to add to that, so the disruption of that model, which was somewhat a positive disruption, but what changed the model in 2007 with the RFP was that concentration on middle school numbers and knowing that every Beacon had to have a certain amount of middle school kids, a certain amount of hours, changed the flexibility that they actually had.
Well, I think that doesn't work, right? Like
exactly. So we're going back.
So I'm glad that you're going back to the roots because we've proven that it works. One reality is that often it was mentioned that principals aren't necessarily as welcoming of Beacon programs. Not necessarily because it didn't work, but more so because it was a community group that often was reflective. And I think that the advantage that we had with these programs is that it is kind of giving a community group that may have cultural sensitivities that the school in the daytime didn't necessarily have. I find that a challenge when I'm told, that's why I was actually on my phone texting and people emailing me, which happens during these hearings. People are emailing you and tweeting questions, but that there's a minimum requirement that there is a signed school partnership agreement. So if a principal says, you know what, I favor one nonprofit over another, or I don't have any after-school athletic program, so I'm going to find a nonprofit that focuses on athletics, as opposed to one that maybe would be more culturally sensitive. How do you differentiate by what the community needs, not necessarily by what DOE needs? Because I know that the battle has always been between DOE wanting to control the Beacon programs, because it was the one program that was within their school that principals didn't have 100% control of. And I say this because I don't think that Beacon directors should be reporting to principals. And if we give this authority or this requirement within this RFP, I find it challenging that that's not something that relationship could eventually evolve into.
All right, so I would say several angles on the matter. One, so we are working with DOE, our sister agency, closely on this. There have been several conversations with principals through DOE, through us. There's another one coming up this coming week around the Beacon model, what the expectations are. To answer to one of your questions, the directors don't report to the principals, but what we have embedded in the RFP, which was a sort of long-standing request from the field, is that our Beacon directors are now going to sit on the building councils, now going to sit on the school leadership teams, and become a part of that planning body, if you will, at the whole school.
Which I think is absolutely correct.
What we found in practice is that the school partnership agreement as a minimum requirement is needed to ensure that the right conversations are happening at the school level with proposals who are coming in, that there's an understanding.
But how do you prevent a principal having influence over your procurement process, your RFP process? If I'm a principal and I have a great relationship with, I don't even want to mention a nonprofit because then but I have a great relationship with one nonprofit over another. Now, I believe that relationship has been tarnished because it's not necessarily the benefit of the community, which is what I would think I'm challenging you as an agency to do. But now you're looking at, well, this school has a great, they have the partnership relationship with the principal. So therefore, this is going to be the better one. But in reality, the stronger relationship with the community could be nonprofit B. So it's almost like, what are you trying to get at? Is it that you're trying to service a community by providing a beacon of hope that the center is on, as you know, as a participant? It's the one building in the middle of December when it's 4 o'clock and it's pitch black outside that all the lights are on. Or, is it going to be something that's going to benefit the school because they have this, and I get the relationship. I had to work closely with my principal at the time, but the reality is that I had to really work at that relationship because originally I was put in a broom closet, right? Like that was my office. And the rest of my stuff was put in a cage in PS 19. And if you go to the Beacon School right now, today, I don't want to say PS 19 because she's a lovely principal and we love her and it wasn't her, but the office for the Beacon is in a cage in the cafeteria. Right? And we have challenges that school is getting an expansion, so I'm hoping the office will be relocated. This is not, please don't tweet me. I'm not talking about PS 19. Love my principal, love my Beacon program. But I'm giving this as an example. So when you're answering this question, and there's supposed to be transparency in this RFP, I am concerned that taking the principal linkage agreement, which is what we used to call them, right, as a I guess, how much do you weigh the linkage agreement in choosing the school sites or the nonprofit site?
Let me just add some perspective. So for the last 3 requests for proposals that DYC has done for school-based programs, the requirement for the school partnership agreement was there. We did it in 2011 in the previous administration. We did it in 2014 with Sonic, and we did it in 2015 because we recognize from the experience, and I'm sure you recognize it, that for a school-based program to succeed, whether it's a Beacon or Sonic or Compass, the nonprofit and the principal have to be on the same page. And it can't be an afterthought. They have to start planning together at the very beginning when they ask for money. So that means that the
So how much is this weighed when you're making your decision?
It's a requirement of the proposal because we can't.
So can a principal work with only one group or several groups?
They can choose to work with 1, 2, or 3
But do
agreements.
you require principals to be open to work with
Yes.
more than one group?
Yes.
You require it?
No, we say they can sign as many agreements as they want to, which is the same thing we did with the.
So on average, how many principals have varied agreements?
I mean, they can only be one Beacon sponsor. So one of the things that
I know that. Right, one sponsor that gets awarded.
And just,
And then there's a requirement in the RFP, which is actually, I think, worth 15 points, that each Beacon has to have 3 partners.
Right.
Because that is important. That was the other part of the original model of the program, which over time eroded, is that the Beacon itself, whoever gets the Beacon contract, can't do it all. They have to be a hub of activity, and the way to do that is to partner with other local CBOs, other city agencies to bring services into the Beacon. So we try to balance the importance of a school principal partnership, which, you know, if it's like a marriage, you can't force a marriage. It has to be organic.
Across the country, in the world, there are marriages.
Well,
that
yes,
aren't
but
necessary.
those don't work that well.
yeah, just added one more point.
Maybe not a good example.
Our experience in releasing the community schools RFP for DOE, we found that, and this was a more stringent process where principals had a lot more authority, but we found that with informative discussions with principals around the model, that we found that there was heavy competition, and that principals did sign multiple agreements with providers to give them a fair chance at applying, being rated, being awarded, and then circling back and working with that whole school.
So I'm going to go offline because obviously I'm speaking about several very clear examples where that is not the case. So, you know, it concerns me that local nonprofits are trying to apply for this opportunity to become representatives, and there are larger nonprofits from outside of the neighborhood that have an advantage because the principals either have, you know, exposure to them or know them from whatever community district they came from before they were placed in the school, and there is a disadvantage if you're from the community and you don't have that relationship with the principal because you've never been in that building. So we can talk about it offline, but I understand you've been doing this for years, but there could be a problem with representation and diverse and cultural sensitivity if we're weighing just based on the principal's opinion. Because in some cases, the principal's opinion would be, you know, I don't want any after-school program in my building, especially in elementary where young people leave things in their desk, the chairs are smaller. You know, there's nuanced things or challenges that are faced by Beacons at a elementary school as opposed to a junior high school.
All right, and I'll be sure to use your testimony about the office space, the PS19, to bargain for better space with the principal.
I know. I feel so bad now. Oh, my God. She's a great principal. Did I say that enough?
She is.
Okay, very good. So that was my Sonic question is 15 million to support 22,800 summer slots. And I know Councilmember Chin alluded to some of this, but that is 5,200 fewer slots than last year. And it seems like you always set up for this question, for this group of questioning. And I just wish you would fund the number that we end up at, which is the whole point. We always end up having these conversations, and then you'll tell me, oh, well, we didn't fill capacity, we're just funding the capacity. And it's the same thing almost that we talk about with funding at baseline as opposed to funding in July, July 1st. And the challenge is, of course, you're going to have a limited number of people applying because parents need to know where they're going to send their kids, not July 1st. You can't wake up July 1st and say, well, thank you, City of New York, for expanding this program. You need to know sometime in May or June where you're going to have your young person be that summer. So it's incredibly frustrating for us to constantly have this conversation with the administration about underfunding slots that should be funded at the right number from the beginning.
Well, as I said at the preliminary budget hearing, the funding was based on last year's actual enrollment. So we've notified the programs a few weeks ago. We've had no concerns raised to us about not enough money. So we think we're in a good place for this year's summer Sonic services. Obviously, next year, the conversation will continue. But I think the early money made a difference, and people are doing planning, and I think the enrollments are going on as we speak.
So you must be speaking to completely different people than we're speaking to, because we are being told that the slots need to be filled and that we're short. I have yet, and Councilmember Chin, I have yet to hear anyone say, oh, we're great, we're at capacity, we don't need anything else. You know, kids, they don't need to come to the summer program, we figured it out. We want to be at the number that we were in by the handshake, by adoption of last year.
The number is, my understanding is that the money given to us was for the 22,000 seats that were actually filled last summer.
That is.
I understand. You're talking about the number that was at the adopted, which there was 4,000 that were never filled.
Right, but they're never filled because it's the challenge that we have. They're not filled because we wait for adoption. So we want you to be at what the real capacity is. And it's like you never get the real capacity number because we're always adopting at a late number. And
No, I understand. I mean, when we planned this with OMB, they looked at the actual enrollment. That was what was the preliminary budget, and that was what programs have been notified. I'm sure any program could always want more seats, but system-wide, this is where we were at last summer.
I think for next year, you should just bring a recording for this one question and just play it back over and over, because it's like we're in this circle, and I wish we could just break the cycle. I wish for you, so that you don't have to go through this questioning, that you could just say from the beginning, I believe that there's capacity to grow this program by this number, that it's not okay to fund it at whatever last year's number, FY18, that in FY19 you can say, if we grow this program by this number, we can fill it. And that is what we want to hear from you, Commissioner, that you can say, this is a program that has capacity to grow by this number. And I know that you can confidently say that because if you were able to get an additional 4,000 slots, let's say an additional 6,000 slots in the preliminary budget, could you fill it?
Given enough time, anything is possible.
Exactly. That's what we want to hear from you. That's the request that we'd like to hear, and the drive that we want to hear from you. I know you can do whatever they give you, but it's the wait list, it's the anxiety, it's the not having. That's the leadership that we would like to see in our partner, because you're our partner. So we want to hear that in prelim, and then that it's reflected in executive, and then we can go fight for more Beacon schools. Because again, if we were to do capacity at 20 new Beacon schools, I know every one of those schools would be filled. We don't want to keep talking about the same 5 things. We'd like to evolve and be innovative with you. But if we don't have you lead the charge at creating and expanding programs, which is the frustration that you get from this side of the table. I'm trying to take a whole different approach with you, Commissioner. And that is to call on you to envision the best case scenario agency for expansion.
I kind of disagree that, the fact that our budget has gone up by 81% speaks to how I think.
How much of that 81% is council funded?
No, this was baseline 81%. It was not that long ago.
How much of that was in response to council requests?
I think the Beacon expansion was something that was on my wish list, and from year one, I've been.
Was it baselined on your wish list?
Yes, it was baseline, and we went from 336 to 400,000 to 550.
We can go back and forth, but I'm going to do some historic sharing with you.
I mean, I think it's a dynamic process. I think the council obviously has a role to play in any agency's budget, but I think the fact that our baseline budget has gone up 81% speaks to the commitment of the administration. It wasn't that long ago where core programs subsisted on one-year funding.
Council, I'm sorry, Chair, I don't even know what to call you anymore. Commissioner, I think it's best if you and I
Sure.
stop this conversation here, because I don't want to get to the space that I usually get with you.
Right.
And it gets right here to the core crust of you asking for funding. And I believe that there is a very big disconnect. While you come and you ask us for funding, we don't want to have to advocate for your basic programming. That is not the role of this council, but it has become the role. And yes, your agency has increased by 81%. Correct. A lot of that has been at the request of this council. And it takes a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and negotiations and pushing for this administration. We are partners with the mayor. We believe and have a lot of shared values with the mayor, but it shouldn't require this much for us to be able to get to 81%. So yes, if we look at your agency on its books, of course it does. But if you look at our advocacy, we have been much focused on DYCD than in any other agency. And the other one would unfortunately be DIFTA. Those are the two agencies that we compare the most, that we have to come out and fight and increase and come out again and fight and increase. And we are saying that there is no budget dance. But it seems a little bit frustrating to be able to say that there is no budget dance when we keep on having the same conversations with you, sir. So I'm gonna let that go, because we get into a very borderline, frustrating space, you and I. And I was hoping and praying that this would be the one hearing that we didn't do that. And I think if we stay away from this budget 80% conversation, we can actually get through this without having to get to that point. So, Chair, if you have your second round of questions, I think this would be a great time to start.
I don't have too many questions, but I just want to, I think, Andrew, right, when you were talking, you mentioned that a pilot program with 50 youth. Would you please elaborate on that, the pilot program for 50 youth? And are you going to recruit those 50 youth? And how long the pilot program will last? Can you elaborate on that?
Right, so I spoke about 4 separate pilots before, and 2 of them have 50 young people participating this summer. There's one around vulnerable youth.
For disconnected youth, of course.
I'm
Yes,
sorry?
Go ahead, please.
There's one for vulnerable youth, and there's one for young people who worked last year who's actually guaranteed a job with the same employer this year.
Okay.
So those are the 2 pilots that I referred to before.
So what about the vulnerable youth, the disconnected youth?
So the vulnerable, well, we don't define vulnerable youth as disconnected youth. So vulnerable youth are those young people who are in the foster care system, they're justice involved, they're runaway homeless, or receiving preventive services from ACS. Yes, there's a pilot for those young people as well. 50 young people will be engaged in community service, project-based learning this summer. And they're going to start working on the first day of SYP, which is July 5th, all the way through August for 6 weeks.
And are they going to be recruited?
The provider is going to do a deep assessment. Once they come in, they're going to sit and talk to that young person to see exactly if they're work ready or not. And if they're deemed work ready, then they're placed at a regular work site. If not, they're going to be placed in this community service project pilot.
We know that the state budget approved the extension, the scope extension for services for the runaway homeless youth. How many, under this extension, how many young people, youth, will be served? Or is there any...
So you're referring to the vulnerable youth option for
No, I'm
SYP?
talking about the runaway homeless youth.
So within SYP, there's 3,000 slots set aside for vulnerable youth, and some of those young people are runaway and homeless youth. So your question is, how many of those?
So what I'm talking about the expansion to the young people to 24 years instead of 22 years.
Oh, that's Susan.
So if we take advantage of that extension.
Oh, you're talking about the runaway homeless youth, the
Yes,
change in the state law.
Youth between
Oh,
24
okay.
and
So let me start.
22 and 24 will be served.
Okay, so let me give you some context so everyone knows what we're talking about. So for many years, the definition by the state of runaway and homeless youth was 16 to 21. So in the budget adopted by the state about a month ago, they allowed for each local youth bureau to raise the age from 21 to 24 as an option. The law does not take effect until January of next year, and so no decision has been made on whether to add services for homeless youth between 21 to 24 until the regulations are issued by the state, because that will determine what the model will look like and what the cost will be. But what the city is doing separately from whether to add runaway and homeless youth services for 21 to 24-year-olds is three things. One, as you may know, the Department of Homeless Services opened up the first shelter for homeless gay youth 21 and older up in the Bronx, actually in Councilman Torres' district. And I had a chance to thank him when I saw him the other day, because he actually welcomed and encouraged the Department of Homeless Services to open this shelter. We worked with Project Renewal, which sponsors that program. It gets funded by the Homeless Services, Department of Homeless Services. And we've developed a strategy to refer young people who age out of our programs so they can go there. And the feedback I've gotten from people who've referred young people there has been very positive. The second thing we're doing to address the needs of young people between 21 and 24 is, as you know, the state released about $1 billion for supportive housing. And so we're working closely with HRA for the first time to be part of the conversation so that some of the new units that are built through supportive housing serve young people between the ages of 21 and 24. And the third thing we're doing is for young people who age out at 21 and are able to live independently, we're working with HRA to streamline the application process for rental assistance vouchers, because right now it's not easily accessible to young people. And so we think those three things will help expand services for young people who are homeless between the ages of 21 and 24.
Thank you very much. That concludes my question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chair. Councilmember Chin.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question about the adult literacy funding. Last year, working with the administration, we were able to put a lot of money in, $12 million, and in our council response, we wanted that money to be baseline, and it didn't happen. So how many New Yorkers were served this year? And then what's going to happen to them next year when the money...
So on your first question, Rong Zhang can maybe answer that number, but since this was a additional funding added in the negotiations during adopted, we expect this conversation will continue. Our focus has been really to enhance existing programs, to make sure that we could spend the money. As you may know, I think I spoke to this at the, maybe not the budget hearing, maybe the immigration hearing, that the $12 million was more than could be absorbed by the current literacy providers. So we exhausted that list. We worked with the council to identify some programs that could be added, new contracts, and then the rest of it was spent by the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs to enhance their educational program, as well as to add services at the Department of Education community schools. So I can speak to the, I think, $7 million of the $12 million that we spent. And Rong Zhang, our Director of Literacy, can talk a little bit about where we're at with the money this year.
Yeah, I mean, in this kind of political climate, we really have to continue to support our immigrant communities. And people, they want to learn English, and they want to be able to improve their lives, get a job, become citizens. We can't just kind of stop the track, put money in and get them started, and then we kind of left them out in the cold. If we don't baseline the funding so that programs can develop, improve, and continue, right? So it doesn't make sense, even though you said, yes, it was negotiated back and forth, last minute, right before adoption, but the intention was always to get it baseline.
So as I said, I think the conversation about baselining will continue, but we're focused on spending down the money this year. I don't think there's any disagreement about the importance of these services. I know my own experience where my mother was not literate in either English or could not read in English or Chinese. There is a clear need for these services. I'm hopeful that it'll continue as we move towards adopted to have more clarity and hopefully some final decisions on this.
I mean, we have to make sure we don't leave the immigrants out in the cold. The people who are like so happy they finally got into a program and all of a sudden now don't know if it's going to continue or not. So can you give me some number? How many individual was able to benefit from the expansion of last year?
Ron Zhang, Senior Director for Adult Education, DYCD. With the additional funds for adult literacy this fiscal year, we were able to serve an additional 5,000, close to 5,400 people through amending existing contracts and also through the designation of additional providers by the council.
What is the total number that the total number that was served with the additional, with the existing funding from before?
So we were serving about 6,000 people before, so with the 5,000 additional, so we're about 11,000.
So we're almost double, right? And not even using up all the money, because some of the money went to the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, right? So we're helping 5,400 people. I hope we're not going to tell them, sorry, that's it, right? So we got to have some decision to make sure that the funding continue. So that's why the baseline, advocacy is so critical. Otherwise, you're leaving 5,400 people out in the cold. And they're the one that's really struggling to improve their lives, right? Finding time after work, after long hours to come to class, to make their lives better, and then we're going to reject them?
So, as I said, I think this will certainly be one of the things that will be discussed in the upcoming conversations with OMB, and we're hopeful for a positive outcome.
So I'm asking you, Commissioner, you got to be a little forceful in advocating, and we'll work with you. But OMB needs to hear that 5,400 people is going to be left out if we don't baseline that funding.
They know the numbers. I think the impact of every decision not to fund something has a consequence in the real world. I think we're always talking to OMB about what the impact will be.
All right, the discussion continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we want to call Councilmember Williams for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner, the last exchange was so incredulous. I need to make sure I can clarify what you were saying. It sounded like you were saying you cannot try to expand the program, meaning you cannot try to solicit employers who would take additional summer youth slots or your work-loan growth slots until you know exactly how many are going to be in the budget. Is that correct?
No, I think we have a finite number of agencies that do this work. So the 65,000 that we proposed in the preliminary budget was based on them telling us this is the maximum they could do.
That's not my question.
Okay.
That's not my question.
Okay.
Can you go out and solicit additional agencies, additional nonprofits, additional employers, and say, would you take additional employees?
We can always increase work sites. That's not the problem.
But isn't that what the capacity problem is?
No. The capacity problem, and Andre can talk about it, is really not work sites. It's about having enough nonprofits to run the program.
I have heard that there are not enough work sites. I've also heard that there are issues with the nonprofits.
No.
You're telling me there's no issues with work sites at all?
So let me just sort of walk through some of the challenges to get beyond the number that we're talking about, right? When we think about work sites, let's think about the younger youth, right? So as I said before, I'm not sure if you were here, young people ages 14 to 15 providers struggle to develop work opportunities for those young people, particularly because employers think that they're young, they're not work ready, and they see it as babysitting, right? So that's why, as we think about this new concept for SYP, we're moving towards more a career exploration, work-based sort of learning opportunity for those young people. So that takes the burden off the providers to develop jobs for them, right?
Okay, the older, because I'm running out of time, the older.
For the older youth, worksite development is fine.
Okay.
But for the younger youth, which is 30% of the allocation, that's always been a struggle.
So what have we done to expand the opportunities, to expand to the slots that we said we were for those ages that are not as problematic?
The older youth, we have engaged, we have done a lot of TA. We've worked with WPTI, which is a Workforce Professional Training Institute group, to really engage our providers, to give them the tools to do more what we call private employer engagement work, right? There's a shift in culture here, and I want folks to understand that. In the past, our providers typically work with small mom-and-pop organizations, daycare, day camps. So what we're trying to do is to encourage our providers to think outside of the box and develop jobs outside of those sectors, right? It's new to them. It's a campaign that we started 3 years ago, so they're still learning, and we're trying to provide as many tools so they could actually develop these jobs.
Okay, so this is the line of questioning, Commissioner, that I'm trying to get at. And I actually don't have time, but I want to dig further down, because if we either have the capacity or we don't, and what are we doing? And my question was, what did we do since last year to build their capacity?
So
from your answer, the answer was nothing. And that doesn't make sense. And then I know in UPK we solicited slots before we even had the money. So why can't we do that here for the youth jobs? And I believe it's because the administration hasn't yet embraced it the same way we have.
So I think, Jimani, I think one thing the Commissioner was trying to explain is what we have done historically has been a part of the process. I was the SYP director myself, so I'm very familiar with this process. We reach out to our providers at the end of the summer every year. We talk about what is the number of young people you could serve to ensure that quality is not
When you say
affected.
provider, you're not talking about the work site.
No, I'm talking about the CBO,
clarify.
right? And we go back and forth, and we have had CBO, and I think this is a very important stat to mention. When we actually awarded contracts to these groups of providers that we have now, which is currently 50 unique providers and 101 unique contracts, we awarded 30,000 slots, all right? So these providers have done an amazing job to scale up to 65,000 to serve these young people, and I think that's incredible. And what we have done along the way is to provide a lot of TA and tools to make sure that they could get to that number. So, we have our providers come back to say, Andre, there's no way I'm going to take an additional 200.
But are the providers saying that they have the question of work sites? Are there enough work sites?
Providers are responsible for developing work sites, and we encourage them to develop the number of work
Are
sites.
there enough
based on their-
work sites?
Are you saying for this summer or the struggle?
In general, like my question is, we have agreed in paper, or at least in speech, to say we're expanding this, but I haven't heard what much is being done to get the additional work sites online, whether it is government agencies right now who don't have any summer youth, or additional employees. And my time is up, so I'll wait for the answer. But I do want to say, Commissioner, I feel like, and this is to piggyback on what the chair was saying, I feel like we provide the vision for this agency on so many of the programs, and that is your job. And I feel like that is not happening, because most of these programs that are expanding and the money is coming from the work that we're doing.
Respectfully, I disagree, Councilmember.
Respectfully,
can I respond?
Sure.
So the vision of expanding the Summer Youth Employment Program, of focusing more on private employers, I announced that 3 years ago, because the default position for many years was to send a young person who's 18 years old to summer camp. It's a great experience for a young person who may be 15 and is the first job, but for young people who have aspirations about doing different things, we needed to do more. It had to be a better experience for them. So we launched a campaign 3 years ago to expand the number of work sites that were not summer camp. And so we now have...
That was for the 30,000 that already existed, not to expand.
To expand the number of work sites,
But
and
not
then
the
working
number.
with the council and with OMB, getting the number up every year. We're also mindful that the people who run the program tell us how many young people they can process. It's a function of how many staff they can hire, and that is something that we work with them every year to get the number. Last year...
I'm sorry, I want to interject.
Sure.
The provider number, what is the provider number that you were given?
The number
What
of,
the capacity?
So When you say we were given, you're referring to from the provider. So what we do, let me walk you through the process, right? So everybody understands what the process looks like. At the end of the summer, the SYP director reaches out to the provider and say, okay, provider A, last summer you served 300 young people. As you know, next summer is coming. What is your capacity for next summer? Sometimes they might even want to reduce that number. We encourage them to go beyond what they did last year, and they give us that number. We take that spreadsheet, we look at the number, and based on that assumption, then we come up with what the...
What is the number that you got for FY18?
For this summer.
Oh, for this summer?
Yes.
65,000.
Can I just say, and even that number, if we hadn't pushed, we wouldn't even gotten there. So not only do we provide the vision, you guys come along kicking and screaming. And so it's very frustrating because if we're not doing any of the pushing, we're not growing. And then I'm hearing that we don't have enough work sites, and it's up to the providers, but I'm not even hearing how we're going to expand the work sites. And if we're saying we're going to expand it, we agreed that we're going to expand. I think we agreed on numbers from different years. I think this year was 75 or 80,000. How are we going to do that if you can't tell me what the plan is to do it?
So there is a plan in place, and that's what we're working through right now.
That's amazing, because I've been trying to figure that out for about 5-10 minutes now.
As we think about the concept paper and the RFP and what that looks like. So as we think about the concept paper, there's going to be two separate RFPs. There's one RFP that's going to be geared towards what we are calling support services. And that means that there's going to be funding for evaluation, for technical assistance, for curriculum development. Where the worksite development piece comes is technical assistance. We're going to be working with a group that's going to be awarded a contract to help our providers develop worksites. So that's the plan. So this group is going to be on board to work with our providers to bring on additional jobs.
I appreciate the extra time I was given. This report probably should have included some of this instead of shirking the responsibility I believe that was given to answer some of these questions that for a report that was given 3 months late. It was supposed to be before the prelims so we could avoid some of this back and forth. And so I'm anticipating to see this plan, and I'm anticipating seeing it articulated in a way that folks can understand, because right now I'm not really sure. But thankfully, this council is going to keep pushing and keep providing the vision, and hopefully you guys will catch up at some point. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. And we have we have questions that we'll be sending out to you, Commissioner. And I would hope that you can get them back to us expeditiously, because we'll be using them to negotiate. And it's very likely that your agency's budget will increase, so that we're letting you know ahead of time that this is something that we are leading and that we are going to be engaging in conversations of, from SYP to the concerns of baselining adult literacy to hopefully addressing some of the or getting more clarity on the beacon schools. So we're going to be following up with the things that are still pending from your end that we'd like to get more follow-up on. So I'm hoping you can get those back to us quickly. Do we have a closing statement? Oh, here we go. That concludes today's hearing. Thank you to Commissioner Chung for your testimony. I'd also like to once again thank our co-chairs. Give me 1 second before you start moving. Council members Barron and Eugene and the members of their committee. The Committee on Finance will reconvene on Monday at 10 a.m. in this room with the Committee on Fire and Criminal Justice Services. To hear from the Fire Department and Emergency Medical Services, we'll also be hearing on Monday from the Department of Corrections, the Department for the Aging, and the Department for Environmental Protection. I want to give another reminder to the public. We'll be invited to testify on Thursday, May 25th, the last day of budget hearings, at approximately 1 p.m. in this room. For any member of the public who wishes to testify but cannot make it to the hearing, you can submit your testimony to the Finance Division on the Council's website, www.council.nycc.gov/budget/testimony, and the staff will make it a part of the official record. I hope everyone has a great weekend, and with that said, this hearing is now adjourned.
Thank you.
got it, Chief.